Have you ever been looked at as if you were invisible and simultaneously the only thing in the room? It's a strange, dissonant feeling. One moment, you're just a person trying to decompress after a long week, waiting for a flight home. The next, you're an obstacle, a problem to be solved, a thing to be removed. They don't know you. They don't know your history, your title, or the fact that with a single text message, you could ground every plane in their fleet. They just see a woman who, in their estimation, needs to be put in her place. And in that moment, you have a choice. Show them their mistake, or hold up a mirror and show them themselves. For me, peace is a rare and precious commodity, a currency I can never seem to accumulate enough of. My days are a meticulously scheduled symphony of board meetings, operational analyses, crisis management calls, and putting out fires that span 3 time zones. My life is lived in 30-minute increments, governed by alerts from my executive assistant. So these moments, tucked away in the anonymous, transient hum of an airport, are my sanctuary. It's the only place where I am not Dr. Johnson, the CEO. I am just a face in the crowd. I was on my way home to Chicago after a 3-day aviation leadership summit in Denver. It was an exhausting affair, full of discussions on carbon-neutral fuel, logistical nightmares, and the ever-present threat of a pilot shortage. All I wanted was to be invisible for the next 2 hours, to lose myself in a biography on my tablet and let the drone of the engines carry me home. I had deliberately dressed for anonymity. A simple, soft, gray zip-up hoodie from my alma mater, comfortable travel pants, and worn-in sneakers. I was a ghost, and I liked it that way. My seat, 14A, was a small slice of heaven, a window seat, my own little portal to the vast Colorado sky. But invisibility, I've learned over a lifetime, is a privilege rarely afforded to people who look like me. You are either ignored completely or scrutinized intensely. There is rarely an in-between. I felt the shift in the air before I heard the voice. It was a pressure change, the kind that precedes a thunderstorm, a sudden drop in the ambient calm. A shadow fell over the glowing screen of my tablet. I looked up from a particularly insightful passage about leadership in the face of adversity. A woman stood over me. She was a vision of curated suburban perfection, dressed in a pristine, cream-colored Lululemon set that probably cost more than my first car payment. Her blonde hair was pulled back into a flawless, high ponytail, and her face was a mask of impatient determination. She was holding the small hand of her daughter, a girl of maybe 8, who was clutching a sparkly, rainbow-maned stuffed lion as if it were a life raft. The woman's movements were sharp, economical, and radiated an aura of someone who has never had to wait in line for anything she truly wanted. "Excuse me," she said. Her voice wasn't just loud. It was engineered to cut through noise, a precise instrument of command. "You're in my daughter's seat." The words weren't a question or a request. They were an eviction notice. Around us, the low, steady murmur of the gate area faltered. A businessman lowered his Wall Street Journal. A young couple paused their hushed conversation. In the digital age, confrontation is a spectator sport, and the arena had just been defined. I saw phone screens, previously pointed downwards, begin to tilt in our direction, their lenses like a dozen unblinking eyes. I took a slow, deliberate breath, a technique my father taught me years ago to manage high-pressure situations. Never let them see you sweat, Amara. Meet their fire with ice. I offered a polite, practice smile, the one I reserve for tense negotiations with union leaders. "I'm sorry, I think there might be a misunderstanding. My boarding pass is for this seat, 14A. I held up my phone, the digital pass clearly displayed on the screen. The woman let out a short, sharp laugh that was more of a bark than a sound of amusement. It was a noise designed to belittle. "A misunderstanding? I don't think so. I booked this specific seat a month ago. I paid an extra $99 for the preferred window view for my daughter. My platinum status doesn't make mistakes. Let me see that." She didn't wait for my permission. She leaned in, her perfume a cloying, expensive mix of vanilla and entitlement, and squinted at my phone screen. It was a blatant invasion of my personal space, a power move clearly meant to intimidate. I held my ground. I have stared down federal regulators threatening to levy 9-figure fines against my company. I was not going to be intimidated by a designer tracksuit. "Madison needs the window," she insisted, straightening up as if she had confirmed her suspicions. "She gets anxious during takeoff. It's a medical necessity for her." The child card. A classic, an often effective maneuver. It instantly reframes her aggression as fierce maternal protection. In the narrative she was weaving for our growing audience, she was the valiant mother, and I was the cruel, unfeeling stranger tormenting a child with a medical condition. The whispers around us grew, fueling her narrative. I saw a college-aged girl, her phone propped artfully on her backpack, subtly go live on TikTok. Her screen name, Zoe in the Air, was visible for a second. The audience was no longer just local, it was global. "Ma'am, I understand completely," I said, keeping my voice soft but clear. "Flying can be stressful for children. Perhaps we could both speak to the gate agent? I'm sure she can clear this up for us and find a solution." "Oh, I don't need her to clear anything up," she announced, her voice rising in volume, projecting to the entire gate area like a seasoned stage actor. "The solution is simple. You move." People like you always think the rules don't apply. You probably got some special government discount or used some charity voucher, and now you think you're entitled to the same perks as people who actually pay full price and contribute to the economy. People like you. There it was. The 3-word sledgehammer, honed over centuries to draw a line in the sand, to separate the us from the them. And just like that, this was no longer about a simple seating error. It was about my right to occupy the space I was in, my very presence being called into question. Suddenly, my comfortable hoodie felt thin, and my hard-won calm felt fragile. The gate agent, a young woman named Jessica who couldn't have been older than 22, hurried over. Her face was a mask of panicked politeness, her eyes darting between me and the increasingly belligerent woman. "Ma'am? Mrs. Mitchell, is there a problem here?" The woman, Karen Mitchell apparently, wheeled on Jessica. "Yes, there's a problem. This woman is in my daughter's seat. I paid for 14A. I have the receipt. I have my platinum membership. I expect the service I pay for." Jessica took both our phones, her brow furrowing in genuine confusion as she looked from one screen to the other. "Oh, that's odd. The system has you both assigned to 14A. It must be a glitch from the server migration this morning. It's happened a couple of times. Mrs. Mitchell, let me see if I can find another." "Don't find me another seat," Karen snapped, cutting her off with surgical precision. "Find her another seat. I was here to claim it. She needs to be removed. End of story." I have every right to be here, and she knows it. The lie was so audacious, so completely untethered from reality, it almost took my breath away. I had been sitting in this very seat for a solid 30 minutes, lost in my book. She had arrived less than 5 minutes ago, but in the chaotic court of public opinion, the first person to shout the loudest is often the one who is believed. I saw it in the slow, confirming nod of a man in a business suit nearby. I saw it in the sympathetic glances an older woman cast toward Madison, who was now starting to look genuinely distressed. My phone buzzed silently in my pocket, a notification from my COO, marked with the highest level of urgency. I glanced down. "Flight Ops Priority Alert. Executive Override available for FLT 847, awaiting your command." It meant I could, with a simple reply, have this woman's ticket voided and a new seat assigned to me without question. But that would be too easy. That would be a technical solution to what was, at its core, a human problem. This wasn't a glitch in the server anymore. It was a glitch in our culture. And as the CEO, it was my job to understand those glitches from the ground up. I silenced the phone. Not yet. Karen continued her performance, her voice dripping with the condescension that was both theatrical and deeply personal. "Some people just think they're entitled to things they haven't earned." I work hard for my family. My husband is a partner at his law firm. We don't take handouts, and we don't appreciate people who try to take what's ours. Madison started to sniffle, overwhelmed by the escalating tension. Karen immediately swept her up, positioning the child on her hip like a human shield. It was a masterful, if cynical, performance. "Now look what you've done," she said, her voice trembling with manufactured outrage. "You're upsetting my daughter!" Her diagnosed anxiety is flaring up, and the window is part of her prescribed coping strategy. You are actively making a child's medical condition worse. The accusation hung in the air, thick and poisonous. The TikTok stream's viewer count visible from the corner of my eye ticked past 1,500. The comments were likely a wildfire of debate. The gate was no longer a waiting area. It had become a stage. And I had been cast without my consent as the villain. The digital display clock above the gate ticked down with an impartial finality. 16 minutes until boarding. The storm was no longer gathering. It had arrived, and I was standing in the center of it. There's a moment in every conflict when the dynamic solidifies, when the amorphous energy of a crowd crystallizes into a shared opinion. Karen's performance had drawn the bystanders in, and now they were no longer just watching, they were participants, jurors in a trial I didn't know I was a part of. The man in the suit muttered to his companion, "She's absolutely right. She paid for it." A woman with 2 toddlers of her own whispered, "That poor little girl. This is awful for her." My presence, my simple, quiet, and legitimate existence in the seat assigned to me had been successfully reframed as an act of aggression. I was the disruptor. I was the problem. That's when the gate supervisor, Marcus Thompson, arrived. He walked with the weary confidence of a man who has seen it all and is profoundly tired of it. He was probably in his late 40s, his uniform immaculate, but his eyes carrying the exhaustion of 1,000 passenger disputes. He didn't look for nuance. He looked for the quickest path to resolution, the path of least resistance. His eyes scanned the scene. Karen, the well-dressed, articulate, frantic mother, her visibly upset child, and me, the solitary black woman in a hoodie. I saw the calculation happen in a split second, an unconscious sorting into categories of problem and victim. In his internal calculus of conflict resolution, I was the variable that was easiest to remove. "What's the holdup here, Jessica?" he asked, his voice firm. "We've got a full flight to board." Karen's face flooded with a look of profound relief, the expression of someone whose cavalry has finally arrived. "Thank God," she said, her voice carrying a note of vindication. "Someone in charge. This woman is refusing to move from my daughter's seat. I showed your agent my boarding pass. I paid for this seat. She's causing a scene and deliberately upsetting my child." Marcus glanced at Jessica, who looked utterly helpless. "Sir, it was a system glitch. The manifest has both passengers assigned to 14A. He waved a dismissive hand, not even bothering to look at the passes himself. "A glitch is a glitch. We'll sort it out with corporate later." He turned his full attention to me, his tone practiced and authoritative, the voice of a man used to dealing with what he perceived as difficult people. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to accept another seat assignment. Mrs. Mitchell and her daughter clearly have priority here. We need to keep things moving." I held his gaze, keeping my own voice level and inquisitive. "With all due respect, Marcus, on what basis do they have priority?" I was seated here when they arrived. "Can you please clarify the airline policy you're citing, ? I used his first name, which I'd read on his name tag. It was a subtle shift, a refusal to be just ma'am. But he didn't deal in policy. He dealt in assumptions. "Ma'am, let's not make this more complicated than it needs to be," he replied, his patience already wearing thin. "The family has a child with special needs." It's my job to make operational decisions on the ground to ensure an on-time departure. Now, I can move you to an aisle seat in row 27, or we can continue this conversation in the customer service office after the plane has departed without you. He was offering me a choice that was no choice at all. Comply or be left behind. The injustice of it was a cold, heavy weight in my chest. This is how it happens, I thought. This is how systemic bias perpetuates itself. It's not always a dramatic edict from on high. More often, it's 1,000 small, weary, biased decisions made by people like Marcus who are just trying to get through their day by taking the easiest path, which is almost always the one that disadvantages the person with the least perceived power. Just then, Security Officer Miguel Rodriguez approached, drawn by the size of the crowd and the raised voices. He was calm, professional, but the presence of his uniform immediately escalated the situation from a customer service issue to a security threat. The crowd instinctively parted for him. Karen seized the opportunity, her voice taking on a new, more fearful tremor. "Officer, thank you. This woman is being disruptive and is refusing to follow the supervisor's instructions. Honestly, I'm worried she might be unstable. My daughter is terrified." Unstable. Terrified. The words were weapons carefully chosen to paint me as a potential threat. And in this country, for a woman who looks like me, being labeled a threat by a woman who looks like her is a dangerously short path to a tragic headline. I saw Officer Rodriguez's professional posture shift. He was no longer observing. He was assessing a potential threat, and his eyes were locked on me. "Ma'am," he said, his voice polite but firm, carrying the full weight of his authority. "I'm going to need you to cooperate with the airline staff. This is a secure area of the airport. We can't have disturbances. Let's resolve this quietly and quickly." The TikTok stream was now over 5,000 viewers. The little screen was a blur of scrolling comments. #AirportKaren, #DenverDrama. I was no longer a person. I was content. A real-time spectacle of public humiliation. Emboldened by her new allies, Karen turned to the crowd as if giving a victory speech. "This is what's wrong with everything today. The entitlement is just unbelievable. I don't know what kind of government assistance program got you this ticket," she said, looking directly at me. "But my tax dollars shouldn't be paying for people to harass my family. Maybe you'd be more comfortable in the cargo hold with the other packages." The insult was so dehumanizing, so utterly vile, that a brief, shocked silence fell over the crowd. For a single, fleeting second, I thought, this is it. This is when someone will step in. This is when another human being's sense of decency will override their desire for entertainment, and they will say, "That's too far." But the silence was broken only by a few uncomfortable coughs and the shuffle of feet. No one spoke up. To them, this was just part of the show. To me, it was a chilling reminder of a lesson I had learned long ago. When you are in the crosshairs, you are almost always on your own. My jaw tightened. It was the only sign I allowed myself that the barb had landed and drawn blood. Marcus stepped closer, lowering his voice, trying to sound reasonable now that he had backup. "Look, I'll give you a $100 travel voucher for the inconvenience. That's the best I can do. Just take the aisle seat, and we can all get on with our day." He was trying to put a price on my dignity. $100. I opened my leather portfolio, a deliberate, slow movement. I adjusted the papers inside without really seeing them. It was a stalling tactic, a way to center myself. "I appreciate the offer, Marcus," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "But before I make any decisions, perhaps we should loop in your regional operations manager. I think this situation might have some significant training value that goes beyond a voucher." His patience finally snapped. The professional veneer cracked. "Ma'am, I am the operations authority for this gate. I don't need to call anyone else. We are done discussing this." He turned to the security officer. "Officer, This passenger is now officially non-compliant. She is refusing a direct order from the ground supervisor. Officer Rodriguez stepped closer to me, his stance now official. Ma'am, you have two options. You can walk to your new seat assignment voluntarily, or I can escort you off the concourse to have this discussion in a more private setting at the security office. It's your choice, but this flight is boarding now. The final move, the threat of removal, of arrest, in front of a crowd of strangers and thousands more online. They had backed me into a corner. They thought they were closing a door on a problem passenger. They had no idea they were about to open a door they could never shut again. My phone buzzed insistently, a text from my general counsel. Amara, seeing significant social media chatter about a situation at DIA Gate A7, please advise. We have FAA and TSA contacts on standby. I silenced the phone. I looked at Marcus's smug, tired face. I looked at Karen's triumphant sneer. I looked at Officer Rodriguez's hand resting near his radio. I looked at the crowd, their phones held up like offerings at a public sacrifice. They all thought they knew how this story ended. I stood up. The movement was slow, fluid, and deliberate. Every eye was on me. For a moment, the entire gate area was completely silent, holding its breath. "You're right," I said, my voice calm and clear. "The discussion is over." I didn't walk toward the back of the plane. I turned, and with a calm that felt like it was forged in ice, I walked toward the gate desk. It was time to change the rules of the game. Walking toward that gate desk was like moving through water. The air was thick with expectation, a tangible force pressing in on me. I could feel the collective gaze of every person in that terminal, a physical weight on my shoulders. They were expecting a final, desperate plea, a protest, a surrender. Marcus called after me, his voice sharp with annoyance and a hint of victory. "Where do you think you're going?" "I told you your new seat is in row 27. Stop making this difficult." I ignored him. My focus was singular. The young gate agent, Jessica, who stood frozen behind the counter, looking like a deer caught in the headlights of an oncoming train. I felt a pang of genuine sympathy for her. She was a pawn in a game she didn't even know she was playing. A casualty of a broken system and a lack of proper leadership. I reached the counter and placed my hands flat on its cool surface, grounding myself. The chaos seemed to swirl around this small island of relative calm. Then, I reached into my leather portfolio. My movements were unhurried, almost ceremonial. I didn't pull out a folder or a boarding pass. I pulled out a single, heavy stock ID card encased in a black leather holder. It wasn't a driver's license or a credit card. It was a corporate executive credential, embossed with a holographic seal. I slid it across the counter to Jessica, making no sound. Jessica leaned forward, her eyes scanning the card. I watched the sequence of emotions play across her young face, like a time-lapse video of a flower blooming and then wilting in seconds. First, simple confusion, then dawning recognition, and then a sudden, gut-wrenching wave of pure, unadulterated horror. The blood drained from her face so quickly that she gripped the edge of the counter for support. Her hand flew to her mouth. "Oh my God," she whispered, the words barely audible, choked with disbelief. "Dr. Johnson, I didn't..." We had no idea. Marcus stalked up behind me, his authority reasserting itself. "What's the problem now, Jessica?" "What is that?" "Don't fall for some fake ID she printed at a copy shop." Jessica was trembling, unable to speak. She held up the ID card as if it were radioactive. Her voice shook as she read the title aloud, each word dropping like a stone into the stunned silence of the gate area. "Dr. Amara Johnson, Chief Executive Officer, Global Operations, United Sky Group." Not just the CEO of a small regional carrier, the CEO of the parent company, the multi-billion-dollar publicly traded corporation that owned this airline, 3 others, a cargo division, and a global logistics network. The silence that followed wasn't just quiet, it was a vacuum, sucking all the air and noise out of the terminal. Every phone, every whisper, every breath stopped. Then came the ripple of understanding, spreading through the crowd like a shockwave. The man in the suit's jaw literally dropped. The woman with the toddlers gasped and covered her mouth. And Karen, her triumphant, righteous smirk dissolved, melting off her face to be replaced by a slack-jawed expression of complete and total disbelief. "No," she sputtered, her voice suddenly small and uncertain. That's impossible. You're lying. That can't be real. CEOs don't fly coach." But even as she said it, she was fumbling for her phone, her fingers flying across the screen with a desperate, frantic urgency. I could see her screen from where I stood. The search query, CEO United Sky Group. The first result was a photo of me on the cover of Forbes magazine. Taken just last year after our record-breaking third-quarter earnings, the headline read, "The Woman Revolutionizing Air Travel." In the photo, I was wearing a sharp Armani suit, my hair professionally styled, but the eyes, the calm, determined expression in those eyes was unmistakably the same one looking back at her right now. A man in the crowd let out a low, impressed whistle. Zoe, the TikToker, was whispering urgently into her phone, her voice filled with a mixture of awe and glee. "Guys, you are not going to believe this. She's not just a CEO. She's the CEO of the whole damn airline corporation. Karen just went to war with the final boss of the entire game." The viewer count on her stream exploded, rocketing past 10,000 as screenshots began to fly across the internet. Marcus snatched the ID from Jessica's trembling hands, his face turning a blotchy, unhealthy red as he stared at it. His entire authoritative demeanor crumbled into dust, leaving behind a terrified, confused employee. "Dr. Johnson," he stammered, the name tasting foreign and terrifying in his mouth. I sincerely apologize. If you had just identified yourself immediately, we could have avoided all this mess." I turned to face him fully. My voice was no longer soft, but it wasn't loud either. It was quiet, precise, and carried the undeniable weight of the 23,000 people I employed. Avoided the mess, or avoided the truth, Marcus? Tell me, should my job title determine the level of dignity I receive? Should I have to be a CEO to be treated like a human being, to be believed, to not be threatened with removal for sitting in a seat I was assigned? The question was for him, but I let it hang in the air for everyone to hear. An indictment of the entire scene. Officer Rodriguez took a subtle step backward, his hand falling away from his radio, as if it had suddenly become electrified. His career was likely flashing before his eyes. He had, on camera, threatened to physically remove and possibly detain the CEO of one of the airport's largest and most powerful business partners. Karen finally found her voice, though it was weak and desperate. But you're wearing a hoodie," she said, as if that single piece of clothing was the linchpin of her entire worldview. You don't look like a CEO." I held her gaze. "And what does a CEO look like, Karen? Tell me. Describe one for me. Is it a color? A gender? A uniform? Please, enlighten me." She couldn't answer. Any words she chose would expose the ugly, prejudiced architecture of her assumptions. She stood there, frozen, the architect of her own spectacular demise. My phone buzzed again. It was the text from Karen's husband, which I could see she was now reading, her face turning from pale to ashen. "Karen, I just saw a video online. Stop talking. Say nothing. Our firm's largest client is the insurance underwriter for United Sky Group." She looked up at me, pure, unadulterated panic in her eyes. It wasn't just about public shame anymore. This was about her life, her family, her finances. "Please," she whispered, her voice cracking with desperation. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know who you were. My daughter. I was just trying. Can we please just forget this whole thing happened?" I pulled out my corporate tablet and tapped the screen, bringing up a real-time operational dashboard that no ordinary passenger would ever see. "Forget?" "No, Karen, we're not going to forget. We are going to learn. This moment, this entire ugly interaction, is going to become a permanent part of this airline's mandatory training curriculum. It will be a case study in unconscious bias, de-escalation failure, and the critical importance of treating every single passenger with dignity. You all provided an invaluable, if unfortunate, data set today." I looked at her, my expression professionally neutral, which I knew was far more terrifying than anger. "However, I believe in restorative justice more than I believe in punishment. It is a core tenet of my leadership philosophy." I turned the tablet screen toward her, displaying two clearly marked options. "So, you have a choice. Option A, I call my legal team. You and your family are permanently banned from flying on all of our carriers and our dozens of codeshare partners worldwide. We forward a formal complaint to the FAA regarding passenger misconduct, which could land you on a federal no-fly list. Option B, you become the first participant in our new mandatory Dignity in Travel executive training program. You will work directly with our corporate training team to help build the curriculum from the perspective of someone who has made these mistakes. You will share your story, this story, with new hires and management across the country. You will use your mistake to ensure no other passenger and no other employee ever has to experience a day like today. You will help us be better." I was offering her a lifeline, a path away from public cancellation and toward private redemption. The crowd was silent, mesmerized. This wasn't the public firing and destruction they had been expecting. It was something far more complex, more profound. "But before you answer," I said, my gaze softening as I looked at Madison, who was now quietly watching everything with wide, confused eyes. "Jessica, please immediately upgrade Mrs. Mitchell and her daughter to first class for their flight to Chicago today. Get them away from this crowd." Jessica, stunned into action, stammered, "But, ma'am, after everything?" "This child is not responsible for the prejudices of her mother," I said firmly, my voice carrying across the gate. "She should have a comfortable flight. Madison deserves to see what grace looks like. That is the most important lesson of all." At the mention of grace, Karen finally broke. A sob, deep and racking, escaped her lips. It was not a sound of anger or frustration, but of what sounded like genuine, soul-crushing shame. She looked from her daughter's innocent face to me, to the choice displayed on the tablet screen. Her path was clear. The reckoning was over. The rebuilding was about to begin. A single moment can be a rock dropped into a still pond. The splash is loud and immediate, capturing everyone's attention. But the real impact, the lasting change, is in the ripples that travel outward, silently, powerfully, changing everything they touch long after the stone has settled to the bottom. The incident at Gate A7 was our rock. The humiliation, the bias, the ugliness, it could have ended there. A viral video, a cautionary tale forgotten in a week, but we chose to make it a beginning. Today, I stood on a stage, addressing a room filled with our top executives, journalists from major news outlets, and officials from the FAA and the Department of Transportation. 1 year ago, I began. A simple system glitch and a profound moment of human failure created a deeply painful public incident. Today, I am here to report that that incident has become the foundation of the most successful and meaningful cultural overhaul in our company's history. The Dignity in Travel initiative was never about punishment. It was about education. It was about creating a new system where respect wasn't a bonus feature for our premium customers, but the baseline operating system for every single human being who entrusts us with their travel. I clicked a button on the remote in my hand, and a new slide appeared on the screen behind me, displaying the metrics we were most proud of. Passenger complaints related to discriminatory treatment were down 48% system-wide. Employee retention in customer-facing roles was up 18%, and our customer service equity scores, a new and revolutionary metric we invented to track the quality of treatment across all demographic lines, were up by a staggering 60%. We didn't achieve this by firing people. We did it by re-educating them. Marcus Thompson, the supervisor from that day, was not terminated. He was reassigned to our corporate training headquarters. He now leads our bias recognition and de-escalation training for all ground staff managers. He's become one of our most passionate and effective advocates for equitable treatment, precisely because he understands, on a deeply personal level, how easy it is to get it wrong. Jessica Martinez is now the Regional Manager for Customer Experience at Denver International Airport, a promotion she earned by helping us redesign our conflict protocols from the ground up, empowering our agents to call for leadership intervention sooner and with more confidence. I clicked the remote again. A professional, polished video began to play on the screen. It was a training module. The person speaking directly and earnestly to the camera was Karen Mitchell. She was poised, articulate, and carried an aura of profound humility. "My name is Karen Mitchell," she said, her image projected 20 feet high. "And a year ago, I made a terrible mistake. I judged a person based on their clothes and the color of their skin. I used my privilege and my status as a weapon. And in doing so, I not only humiliated another human being, but I taught my daughter a terrible lesson in intolerance. I was wrong, completely and inexcusably. The program that Dr. Johnson offered me wasn't a punishment. It was a gift. It was a second chance. It was an opportunity to unlearn the biases I didn't even know I carried so deeply, and to help build a system where what happened to Dr. Johnson will never happen to anyone again." Karen had become the unexpected star of our program. Her story, told in her own words, was more powerful than any corporate memo or paid actor could ever be. She was real. She was relatable in her failings, and her transformation was undeniably genuine. She volunteered hundreds of hours, speaking to thousands of employees. Her husband's law firm, at her insistence and with the full support of its partners, established a multi-million-dollar pro bono program dedicated to fighting systemic discrimination cases in housing and employment. They didn't just save a lucrative corporate client. They changed their entire firm's mission. The ripples didn't stop with us. Today, 27 other airlines, including our two largest domestic competitors, have licensed and adopted the Dignity in Travel framework for their own staff. Zoe Monroe, the college student whose live stream captured the original incident, used the footage as the centerpiece for her award-winning documentary, Gate A7, Anatomy of a Moment. It premiered at the Sundance Film Festival and was recently licensed by Netflix for global distribution. She used the money from the sale to start a nonprofit foundation that provides grants to young independent journalists who focus on stories of corporate and social accountability. The change was real, it was measurable, but the most profound impact, the ripple that meant the most to me personally, arrived not in a quarterly report or a press release, but in a small, hand-addressed envelope 3 months ago. "Dear Dr. Johnson, my name is Madison Mitchell. I am 9 years old now. My mom says you are a very important and busy lady, but she also says you are very kind. I wanted to thank you. That day at the airport was scary. I didn't understand what was happening. But my mom changed after that day. She is nicer now. She says you taught her how to see people with her heart, not just her eyes." Tucked inside the letter was a drawing, done in bright purple crayon with the charming imprecision of a child. It was a picture of an airplane flying through a sky full of smiling clouds. In the cockpit window were 2 figures, drawn as stick people. One had yellow scribbled hair. The other had brown scribbled skin and was wearing a pilot's hat. Below the drawing, In big, blocky letters, Madison had written, "When I grow up, I want to fly planes with you." I carefully folded the letter and placed it on my desk, right next to the framed copy of the Forbes magazine cover. They say that instant karma is about getting what you deserve, a swift and satisfying punishment. But maybe real karma, the kind that truly changes the world, isn't about punishment at all. Maybe it's about creating opportunities for redemption. It's not about watching people fall. It's about giving them a reason to rise. That day, I could have chosen revenge. I could have destroyed careers and a family with a single justifiable phone call. But I chose to build something new from the wreckage of something ugly. And in the process, a little girl who once saw a monster in a window seat now sees a co-pilot. That, more than any stock price, any industry award, or any magazine cover, is the only legacy that truly matters. Dignity is a choice we make in every interaction. Share this story if you believe in the power of redemption. Subscribe for more stories that change the world.